Byron Williams here, 72 years old and watching my world collapse from a hospital bed. 3 days ago, a heart attack knocked me down in my garden. Now, my 3 children think I'm checking out permanently. Through the window of my room, I can see them in the parking lot, loading my television into Thomas's truck. My beach house keys dangling from Amanda's fingers, my life being divided while I'm still breathing. Wait till you hear what happened next. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, and subscribe to hear the whole story. Let me tell you how I got here. My name is Byron Williams, and I built everything I own from absolutely nothing. 50 years ago, I started with a small loan and a dream to develop real estate. I worked 16-hour days, sacrificed weekends, and poured every cent I made back into building my business. Eventually, those sacrifices paid off, and Williams Development became one of the most respected real estate companies in the Northeast. The true treasure of my life was my wife, Elizabeth. We were married for 42 beautiful years before cancer took her from me 5 years ago. She was my rock, my conscience, and honestly, probably the better parent between us. While I was building our financial future, Elizabeth was building our family's heart. We had 3 children together. Thomas came first 47 years ago. He followed my footsteps into the financial world, becoming an investment banker at a prestigious firm in Boston. From the outside, he looked successful. Tailored suits, luxury car, corner office. What most people don't see is the gambling problem that's plagued him since college. Blackjack, sports betting, even day trading. Any opportunity for a rush and he's all in. I've bailed him out more times than I can count, always with the promise that this is the last time, Dad. Amanda arrived 3 years after Thomas. She's 44 now, an interior designer with exceptional taste and a spending habit to match. Everything in her life must be perfect, curated, magazine-worthy. This obsession with perfection has cost her 2 marriages already. Both ex-husbands claimed they couldn't live up to her impossible standards. After each divorce, she's come back to me for financial support, treating my accounts like her personal safety net. My youngest is Zachary, 39 years old and still trying to find himself. He's bounced between careers like a pinball: photographer, writer, organic farmer, tech startup founder, yoga instructor. Nothing sticks longer than 18 months. What remains consistent is his monthly call asking for money to fund the next great passion. Elizabeth always made excuses for him, saying he was a free spirit and just needs time to find his path. Since Elizabeth passed away, my relationship with all 3 children has steadily deteriorated. Without her mediating influence, our interactions became increasingly focused on money. Each visit started with casual conversation but inevitably turned to hints, then outright requests for financial support. I wanted to help them become independent, successful adults, but my assistance seemed to achieve the opposite effect. 2 months ago, things came to a head when Thomas called at midnight, voice shaking, explaining he owed some very serious people nearly $100,000 from a poker game gone wrong. When I refused to write another check, all 3 children showed up at my house the next day for what they called an intervention about my increasing stubbornness and irrational financial decisions. What I own isn't insignificant. Beyond the family home in Connecticut where we raised the children, a colonial sitting on 3 acres with a pool and tennis court, I've kept Elizabeth's favorite place, our beach house in Maine. It's a stunning property on the water that's probably quadrupled in value since we bought it 30 years ago. For convenience, I maintain an apartment in New York City for business trips. And there's my collection of classic cars that I've restored over the decades, my pride and joy after Elizabeth. Throughout all the financial and family complications, I've had one steady advisor, my attorney, Jackson Patterson. We've worked together for 30 years, and he's more friend than lawyer at this point. Jackson has seen my business grow, watched my children mature, grieved with me when Elizabeth died, and repeatedly cautioned me about being too generous with my adult children. "You're not helping them by solving every problem, Byron," he would tell me. "Sometimes people need to face consequences to grow." I knew he was right, but saying no to your children never gets easier, even when they're middle-aged. 2 years after Elizabeth's passing, once the initial fog of grief lifted slightly, I joined a support group for seniors who had lost spouses. That's where I met Sophia. At 68, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her own heartache. Her husband of 40 years had died suddenly from a stroke, leaving her to navigate life alone, much like me. We started with coffee after group meetings, then lunch dates, then dinner. I found myself looking forward to our conversations. She was intelligent, kind, and understood the complexity of grief without drowning in it. For the first time since Elizabeth died, I felt a genuine connection with someone. When my children discovered I was spending time with Sophia, their reaction was swift and harsh. "Gold digger," Amanda called her. Though Sophia had her own comfortable savings from a career in education administration. "Replacing Mom already?" Thomas accused, despite it being 2 years since Elizabeth's death. Zachary suggested I was having some kind of late-life crisis and should focus on supporting your family instead of dating. I kept seeing Sophia despite their disapproval, though I became more private about our relationship to avoid their judgmental comments. What started as friendship gradually blossomed into love, different from what I'd shared with Elizabeth, but genuine and nurturing nonetheless. Little did I know then how crucial Sophia would become when my whole world turned upside down. The morning everything changed began like any other Tuesday. I was in my garden, tending to the tomato plants Elizabeth had always loved. The Connecticut summer sun warmed my back as I knelt in the soil, pulling weeds and checking for pests. A sudden pressure in my chest felt like someone had parked a truck on my sternum. When I tried to stand, my left arm went numb, and the world tilted sideways. I remember collapsing among the tomato vines, my face pressed against the earth, thinking absurdly that I should have worn my gardening gloves as my fingers clutched at the dirt. The pain was extraordinary, radiating, crushing, absolute. My neighbor Frank had been mowing his lawn and spotted me go down. I later learned he jumped the fence between our properties and ran to my side, already dialing 911 on his cell phone. My last clear memory before the ambulance arrived was Frank's worried face hovering over mine, saying, "Hang in there, Byron. Help is coming." The next thing I knew, I was in the intensive care unit at Greenwich Hospital, surrounded by beeping machines and concerned medical staff. A doctor with kind eyes explained I had suffered a significant heart attack. They had performed an emergency procedure to clear a blocked artery and insert a stent. "You were lucky," she said. "If your neighbor hadn't found you so quickly, this could have ended very differently." The first 48 hours were critical. The medical team wasn't entirely confident I would pull through, and they made no attempt to hide this from my children when they arrived at the hospital. Thomas, Amanda, and Zachary gathered around my bed, their faces showing what appeared to be genuine concern. I drifted in and out of consciousness, catching snippets of their conversations with the doctors and each other. It was during one of these periods of semi-consciousness, when they thought I couldn't hear, that I first realized something was terribly wrong. "Did Dad ever update his will after Mom died?" Amanda asked, in a hushed voice. "I think so," Thomas replied. "Jackson would know for sure." "Should we call him?" Zachary wondered. "I mean, if things go south." "Not yet," Thomas said. "But someone should check Dad's phone for his banking passwords, just in case decisions need to be made quickly." I wanted to open my eyes, to tell them I could hear them plotting, but my body refused to cooperate. Their words floated around me like poisoned darts, each one finding its mark in my heart that was already struggling to heal. By the third day, my condition had stabilized enough for the doctors to feel cautiously optimistic. The cardiologist explained to my gathered children that while I had experienced a severe heart attack, I was responding well to treatment. With proper rehabilitation and medication, I could expect a reasonable recovery. "So he's going to be okay?" Amanda asked, her tone carrying something I couldn't quite identify. "He'll need several weeks in the hospital and then rehabilitation, but yes, barring any complications, your father should recover," the doctor replied. I kept my eyes closed, but I could feel the shift in energy in the room. There was no collective sigh of relief, no happy exclamations. Instead, a strange tension filled the air. "Several weeks in the hospital?" Thomas clarified. "At minimum," the doctor confirmed. "And then perhaps a month or more in a rehabilitation facility." Heart attacks of this severity require extensive recovery time, especially at your father's age. After the doctor left, I remained still, breathing evenly as though asleep. Through barely open eyes, I watched my children's behavior transform. The concerned expressions they had worn for the medical staff melted away, replaced by barely concealed disappointment. "I've already called the real estate agent about listing the beach house," Thomas muttered. "Now, what am I supposed to tell her?" "Tell her to hold off," Amanda suggested. "We don't know what complications might arise." "That's cold, even for you," Zachary said, though he didn't sound particularly upset by the sentiment. "It's practical," Amanda defended herself. "Dad's in his 70s and just had a massive heart attack. We need to be prepared for all possibilities." While pretending to sleep, I observed Thomas rifling through my personal belongings, pocketing my phone and scrolling through it with practiced efficiency. Amanda took my house keys from the drawer beside my bed, claiming she needed to check on things at my home. Zachary cornered a nurse in the hallway, asking detailed questions about my prognosis and the likelihood of a full recovery versus ongoing complications. That night, alone in my hospital room with only the rhythmic beeping of machines for company, I faced the devastating truth. My children were waiting for me to die. More than that, they seemed disappointed that I would live. The realization hollowed me out more painfully than the heart attack ever could. The night nurse, Gloria, found me silently weeping around 2 in the morning. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with gentle hands and observant eyes. "Pain bothering you, Mr. Williams?" she asked, checking my monitors. "Not the physical kind," I admitted. Something in my voice must have conveyed the depth of my distress, because she pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Want to talk about it?" I've got good ears and I'm told I give decent advice. Over the next hour, I confided everything I'd overheard. Gloria listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or shaking her head. "Family can be the greatest blessing and the deepest hurt," she finally said. "I've seen it too many times in this job." "I knew they were financially dependent," I said. "But I never thought they were waiting for me to die." Gloria patted my hand. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet. But I need to see what they're doing with my keys." Gloria hesitated before pulling out her personal tablet. "Hospital Wi-Fi isn't great, but if you have security cameras at your house, maybe we could check?" With her help, I logged into my home security system. What I saw confirmed my worst fears and broke what remained of my heart. The security camera feeds displayed on Gloria's tablet revealed a scene that felt like watching burglars ransack my home, except the thieves were my own children. Thomas had wasted no time. The timestamp showed him entering my house less than 2 hours after taking my keys from the hospital. He went straight to my home office, rifling through filing cabinets and desk drawers, photographing financial documents with his phone, checking on things. "My foot," I muttered as Gloria squeezed my shoulder in silent support. We switched camera views to see Amanda walking through each room with a notebook, cataloging items. She lingered on artwork, antiques, and electronics, occasionally speaking into her phone, apparently recording voice notes about each piece. "That vase she's looking at was a 20th anniversary gift from Elizabeth," I told Gloria, my voice tight. "It's from an artist in Venice we met on vacation." Zachary's role became clear the next day when he brought a middle-aged man in a tweed jacket through the house. The man examined furniture pieces, occasionally making notes. "An antique dealer," I said flatly. "They're getting appraisals already." Over the next several days, between medical tests and therapy sessions, I watched through security cameras as my life was systematically dismantled. Moving trucks arrived at the house. Men in uniforms carried out smaller valuables first. Artwork from the walls, electronics, collectibles I'd gathered over decades. My vintage record collection, over 500 albums carefully curated since my 20s, disappeared in plastic bins. Elizabeth and I had spent countless evenings listening to those records, dancing in the living room after the children were in bed. Now strangers carried them away while my children supervised. Amanda hosted a parade of potential buyers for my classic car collection. I watched her leading people to the garage, unlocking it with keys taken from my bedside drawer. My 1965 Mustang convertible, the 1972 Jaguar E-Type, the 1958 Corvette I'd spent 5 years restoring, all being examined by strangers who ran their hands over fenders I had polished to perfection. Thomas met with a real estate agent in my living room, spreading documents across the coffee table Elizabeth had selected during our 10th year of marriage. I could read his lips well enough through the security feed to understand they were discussing listing prices for both the Connecticut house and the Maine Beach property. Perhaps most painful was watching Zachary host what could only be described as a party in my home. 24 people I'd never seen crowded into my living room and kitchen, drinking from crystal decanters that had belonged to my father. They spilled drinks on Elizabeth's hand-woven Persian rug, put cigarettes out in potted plants, and treated my home like a rented party venue. Near midnight, Thomas called for attention, raising a glass of my 30-year-old scotch. The security microphones picked up his toast clearly. To Dad's early inheritance plan. May we enjoy it while we're still young enough to appreciate it. Laughter and cheers followed as my children clinked glasses, celebrating their windfall while I lay in a hospital bed 10 miles away. I turned away from Gloria's tablet, unable to watch anymore. The physical pain of my heart attack paled in comparison to this betrayal. These were my children, the same babies I had cradled, the toddlers whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenagers I had stayed up waiting for on prom nights. Now they couldn't even wait for me to die before dividing my possessions. I need to call my attorney, I told Gloria. She nodded grimly. I think that's wise, Mr. Williams. The next morning, after confirming no family members were scheduled to visit, I asked Gloria to help me place a call to Jackson Patterson. She dialed the number and held the phone to my ear since I was still connected to various monitors that limited my movement. Byron, Jackson answered, his voice immediately concerned. I've been trying to reach you for days. Your children told me you were too weak for visitors or calls. They lied, I said simply. I need your help, Jackson. It's worse than we thought. I explained everything I had seen through the security cameras. Jackson remained silent throughout my account, but I could practically feel his anger building through the phone. I told you they were taking advantage, Byron, but even I didn't expect this level of callousness, he finally said. Do you want me to confront them? No, I replied after a moment of consideration. Not yet. Let's see how far they're willing to go. Besides, we prepared for something like this, didn't we? We did, Jackson confirmed. Everything is in place legally. They're selling items they have no right to sell. Let them continue for now, I decided. I want to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. Are you sure, Byron? They're liquidating your possessions. Some things are worth losing to learn the truth, I said, a new resolve strengthening my voice. I need to see who my children really are when they think no one is watching. After ending the call with Jackson, I settled back against my pillows, a strange calm replacing the heartache. The truth was painful but clarifying. For years, I had been making excuses for my children's behavior, enabling their worst impulses out of a misguided sense of parental obligation. Elizabeth would have been devastated to see what they had become, or perhaps she had seen it beginning and tried to shield me from the truth. Either way, I now faced reality with open eyes, and thankfully, Jackson and I had already put a plan in place that would soon give my children the shock of their lives. 2 years earlier, as I sat in my first grief support group meeting, I had no idea how significantly my life was about to change. The circle of folding chairs held 8 people, all of us united by the common experience of losing a spouse. When Sophia Jenkins introduced herself, something in her calm dignity immediately caught my attention. My husband Robert died 9 months ago from a sudden stroke, she said, her hands steady in her lap despite the emotion in her voice. We were married 40 years. Some days I still expect to hear his key in the lock at dinner time. After the meeting, we found ourselves lingering in the community center parking lot, neither quite ready to return to empty homes. I suggested coffee at the diner across the street, and to my surprise and relief, she accepted. That first conversation lasted 3 hours. Sophia had been an education administrator before retirement, running a school district with 15,000 students and a budget of millions. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and possessed a quiet strength that reminded me somewhat of Elizabeth, though they were different in many ways. We talked about our children. Her only son lived in Seattle and called dutifully once a week but rarely visited. "I think my grief makes him uncomfortable," she admitted. "It's easier for him to keep his distance." I shared stories about Thomas, Amanda, and Zachary, trying to focus on happy memories from their childhood rather than my current concerns about their behavior. Still, something in my tone must have revealed my worry. "You seem troubled about your relationship with them," Sophia observed gently. "They've become very interested in my financial support since their mother died," I admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if that's all they see when they look at me now. A checkbook with an expiration date." Sophia reached across the table and briefly touched my hand, the first physical contact I'd had with anyone outside of a handshake since Elizabeth died. "That must be painful," she said simply. Our coffee dates became weekly, then twice weekly. We discovered shared passions for classical music, gardening, and travel. Within 6 months, we were having dinner together most evenings, either at my home or hers. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow. Sophia understood grief without being consumed by it. She spoke of her late husband with love and respect, but didn't live in the past. She helped me see that moving forward wasn't a betrayal of Elizabeth's memory, but a tribute to the love she had given me. "Elizabeth loved life," Sophia said one evening as we walked along the beach near my main house. "Would she want you to stop living yours?" I knew the answer was no. Elizabeth had always been the one pushing me to experience more, enjoy more, connect more deeply with the world around me. As Sophia and I grew closer, my concerns about my children's financial dependence deepened. Thomas had lost another $100,000 gambling and expected me to cover it. Amanda's interior design business was floundering because she spent more than she charged clients, expecting me to make up the difference. Zachary had abandoned his latest venture, an artisanal coffee roasting company, after 3 months, leaving behind equipment loans I ended up paying off. "You know what you're doing isn't helping them," Sophia observed after I vented my frustrations one evening. "They'll never learn responsibility if you keep shielding them from consequences." "I know," I admitted, "but they're my children. It's hard to say no. Sometimes love means setting boundaries," she said. "My father taught me that the greatest gift he could give me was the ability to stand on my own 2 feet. Don't your children deserve that same gift?" Her words resonated deeply, echoing what Jackson had been telling me for years. I began to see how my financial rescues weren't acts of love but enablement, that kept my children trapped in patterns of irresponsibility and entitlement. 6 months before my heart attack, I invited Jackson to my home to discuss a complete overhaul of my estate plan. Sophia joined us, her background in administrative leadership providing valuable perspective. "I want to protect my assets," I explained to Jackson, "not just from outside threats, but from my own children's worst impulses." Jackson nodded, unsurprised. "I've been waiting for this conversation for years, Byron. What did you have in mind?" Over the next several weeks, we crafted a comprehensive new approach to my estate. I created an irrevocable trust that would protect my assets while still allowing me to benefit from them during my lifetime. The legal structure was complex, but essentially transferred ownership of my properties and major assets into the trust. "Once this is done, you can't simply undo it," Jackson warned. "Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" I thought about my children's increasing demands, their sense of entitlement to what I had spent a lifetime building, their inability to manage their own finances responsibly. "I'm certain," I confirmed. "This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting them from themselves and teaching them what really matters." What I didn't tell Jackson initially was that my relationship with Sophia had deepened into love. We had discussed marriage but hesitated, knowing how my children would react. They had already made their disapproval of our friendship clear, calling Sophia cruel names behind my back and to her face. 3 months before my heart attack, Sophia and I decided to formalize our commitment without the public ceremony that would certainly bring drama from my children. In a private gathering at Jackson's lake house, With only 4 close friends as witnesses, we exchanged vows. Jackson handled the legal paperwork, and just like that, Sophia Jenkins became Sophia Williams. We kept our marriage private, not out of shame but out of a desire for peace. We had both lived long enough to know that happiness is precious and sometimes best protected through discretion. Sophia continued to maintain her own home while spending most nights at mine, giving us the joy of partnership without the complications that would come from announcing our union to my disapproving children. As part of our new life planning, I named Sophia as the trustee of my irrevocable trust. The trust owned my properties and major assets, with specific provisions for how they could be used and eventually distributed. If anything happened to me, Sophia would ensure my wishes were carried out. Now, lying in my hospital bed watching my children dismantle my life through security camera footage, I was profoundly grateful for the legal precautions we had taken. They thought they were selling their inheritance early, but in reality, they were selling property that wasn't legally theirs to sell. I reached for the hospital phone and called Jackson again. "Everything is in place as planned," he confirmed after I updated him on the latest developments. "Do you want me to step in now?" I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to stop the destruction immediately, but another part needed to see exactly how far my children would go. Give it 3 more days, I finally decided. Let them get the beach house sale ready. That's where we'll draw the line. "Are you sure, Byron? They've already sold so many of your possessions. Things can be replaced," I said, though even as I spoke I felt the ache of losing items that carried memories of Elizabeth and our life together. I need to know the full extent of what they're capable of. "Then we'll act," Jackson agreed reluctantly, promising to monitor the situation and be ready to implement our plan when I gave the word. After hanging up, I stared out the hospital window at the summer sky, thinking about Elizabeth, about Sophia, about the family I thought I had versus the reality I now faced. The heart attack had nearly killed me, but it had also revealed a truth I needed to see. Sometimes the most painful revelations are also the most necessary. After 2 weeks in the hospital, my doctors determined I was stable enough to be transferred to a rehabilitation facility closer to home. The Riverside Recovery Center occupied a former mansion on the banks of the Connecticut River, converted into a medical facility but maintaining much of its original charm. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the common areas overlooked manicured gardens and the water beyond. The day I was transferred, all 3 of my children appeared at the hospital, presenting a united front of filial concern for the benefit of the medical staff. They accompanied my ambulance to Riverside, speaking with the intake coordinator about my care needs and visiting schedule. "We'll be here every day, Dad," Amanda promised, squeezing my hand while a nurse adjusted my new room. Family is everything, especially during recovery. Their performance was flawless, devoted children rallying around their ailing father. Only I knew it was exactly that, a performance. Once the medical staff dispersed, leaving us alone, the facade cracked immediately. "So, about the beach house," Thomas began without preamble. "We've had an excellent offer, $4.2 million. Seems low," I remarked, watching their reactions carefully. "Market conditions," Thomas said smoothly. "Best to move quickly. The real estate agent thinks we could get more if we wait until spring," Amanda added. "But carrying costs through winter makes selling now more practical. Plus, the buyers are motivated and flexible on closing dates," Zachary chimed in. "They're not even requesting many repairs." I nodded thoughtfully, as though considering their points. "You 3 have been busy while I've been laid up." "Just trying to help, Dad," Thomas said, not meeting my eyes. "Take some burden off your shoulders during recovery." Their visit lasted precisely 35 minutes, long enough to be noted in the visitor log, but not so long as to interfere with whatever else they had planned for the day. As they prepared to leave, I asked casually, "Will you bring some photos from the house next time?" "I'm feeling nostalgic." They exchanged quick glances. "Sure, Dad," Amanda replied too brightly. "Any particular ones?" "The family albums from the living room bookcase would be nice," I suggested, knowing perfectly well those albums had likely already been removed. "I'll look for them," she promised, the lie slipping easily from her lips. After they left, I settled back against my pillows and pulled out the tablet Gloria had helped me purchase before leaving the hospital. With the rehabilitation center's Wi-Fi, I could continue monitoring my security cameras. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. My home was being systematically emptied. The visits from my children became increasingly sporadic over the next week. Thomas came alone twice. Each time with new documents he pressured me to sign, power of attorney forms, property transfer authorizations, banking access letters. I feigned fatigue and confusion, promising to review them when my head is clearer. Amanda visited once, bringing flowers but not the photo albums I had requested. "Still looking for them, Dad," she said vaguely. "The house is so cluttered." Zachary didn't visit at all, texting excuses about a consulting opportunity that required his immediate attention. Meanwhile, my security feeds showed a house being steadily stripped of its contents. The beach house in Maine was similarly being emptied. Furniture, artwork, even the custom stained glass windows Elizabeth had commissioned for the sunroom were carefully removed and loaded into trucks. One evening, I received an alert that the real estate listing for the beach house had gone live. The photos showed rooms I barely recognized, staged with rental furniture after my own possessions had been removed. The description lauded the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and priced to sell quickly at what I knew was well below market value. The familiar ache in my chest returned as I looked at the images of Elizabeth's favorite place. We had spent every summer there since the children were small. The wraparound porch where we'd watched countless sunsets, the kitchen where she taught the kids to make her famous blueberry pie, the stone fireplace where we'd huddled during northeastern storms, all reduced to selling points for a quick transaction. I switched camera feeds to my Connecticut home and found Thomas and Amanda arguing in what remained of my living room. "We need to split everything 3 ways, Amanda insisted, gesturing at a pile of items yet to be removed. "That's not fair and you know it," Thomas shot back. "I'm the one who found buyers for the cars. I should get a larger percentage of those sales. And I'm the one who staged the beach house and found a buyer in less than a week," Amanda countered. "That commission should be weighted in my favor." "You're both forgetting who's been managing Dad this whole time," Zachary interjected, walking into frame. "Keeping him calm, stopping him from calling Jackson. That's the hardest job of all." Their voices overlapped as the argument intensified, each claiming greater entitlement to my possessions based on their contributions to the scheme. Not once did any of them express concern about my recovery or remorse for what they were doing. They had moved beyond viewing me as their father. I was now simply an obstacle between them and wealth. The following day, I received notification that a closing date had been set for the beach house sale, just 2 days away. According to the security system, my children had already removed everything of value, leaving only basic furniture for staging purposes. The sale would be finalized before I could possibly interfere. That evening, alone in my rehabilitation center room, I felt the full weight of what was happening crash down upon me. It wasn't just things being lost, it was memories, connections to Elizabeth, the physical manifestations of our life together. The beach house, particularly, had been her sanctuary, the place where she felt most at peace. Losing it felt like losing a piece of her all over again. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Elizabeth and me on the beach, the children building sandcastles, family dinners on the deck as the sun set over the water. Decades of joy captured in images, while the physical space that held those memories was about to be signed away without my consent. Then I found a particular photo that stopped me, Elizabeth sitting on the porch swing, a contentment on her face I'd rarely seen elsewhere. She had looked up just as I took the picture and said something I'd never forgotten. "Things are just things, Byron. It's the love they remind us of that matters." In that moment, clarity washed over me. The houses, the cars, the possessions, they held memories, yes, but the memories themselves lived in my heart, not in objects. What truly mattered was honoring Elizabeth's values, and she would be heartbroken to see what our children had become. I picked up my phone and called Jackson. "It's time," I said when he answered. "They're closing on the beach house in 2 days." "I'll handle everything," Jackson promised. "Are you sure you're ready for the fallout? This won't be pretty. I'm sure, I replied, a weight lifting from my chest despite the difficult confrontation ahead. Let them know. The day of reckoning arrived with perfect New England summer weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of nearby gardens through my open window at Riverside. According to the schedule Jackson had shared, my children would be meeting at the notary's office at 10 o'clock to complete the beach house sale. The buyers had wired the full payment, eager to take possession of the waterfront property before the prime summer season ended. At precisely 10:15, my phone rang. It was Jackson. "How did it go?" I asked, picturing the scene I couldn't witness in person. "Exactly as expected," Jackson replied, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Complete shock followed by disbelief, then anger. The notary handled it perfectly, very professional despite the colorful language that followed her announcement. I could imagine it clearly. My 3 children, dressed for success, Montblanc pens ready to sign the final documents that would convert my beloved beach house into millions in their bank accounts. The notary, a professional woman in her 50s whom Jackson had worked with for years, calmly informing them that the property they were attempting to sell had, in fact, a different legal owner, and it wasn't Byron Williams. "What happened after the initial shock?" I asked. "Thomas demanded to know who owned the property if not you." When the notary explained it was held in a family trust, Amanda started shouting about fraud and deception. Zachary actually knocked over a chair. I winced, embarrassed by their behavior even now. "And then? That's when I made my entrance," Jackson said. "I had been waiting in an adjoining office. Perfect timing, if I do say so myself. I walked in just as Thomas was threatening legal action against the notary's office. The scene Jackson described unfolded like theater in my mind. Him walking in with his leather briefcase, the authority of 40 years of legal practice evident in his bearing. My children, momentarily silenced by the appearance of my trusted attorney. I informed them that no fraud had occurred, Jackson continued. The beach house, along with the Connecticut property, the New York apartment, and most of your other major assets, had been legally transferred into an irrevocable trust 6 months ago. They have no claim to any of it. How did they react to that? I asked, almost dreading the answer. Thomas turned an alarming shade of red. I was concerned we might have another Williams in cardiac care. Amanda burst into tears, theatrical ones, not genuine. And Zachary kept repeating, "This isn't happening," while staring at his phone calculator, presumably watching his expected windfall disappear. I shook my head, saddened but not surprised. "Did you explain the full situation?" I outlined the basics, that the trust was legally established, properly executed, and completely legitimate. I explained that they have no standing to challenge it, and that any items they've already sold were not legally theirs to sell, which could potentially expose them to legal consequences. And then they rushed out, saying they were coming to see you immediately. I wanted to give you a heads up. Based on their state when they left, I'd expect them within the hour. I thanked Jackson for the warning and ended the call, mentally preparing myself for the confrontation to come. I'd had weeks to process my children's betrayal, but they were just now discovering their plans had failed. Their anger would be raw and unfiltered. True to Jackson's prediction, less than 45 minutes later, all 3 of my children burst into my rehabilitation room without knocking. Their faces displayed a spectrum of emotions: rage, disbelief, indignation. "What have you done?" Thomas demanded, his voice echoing off the sterile walls of my room. I looked at each of them calmly before answering. "I protected what's mine. The same thing you 3 have been trying to do behind my back, only I did it legally." "You can't just transfer everything into a trust without telling us," Amanda cried, mascara already streaking down her cheeks. "We're your children, your heirs. Being my children doesn't entitle you to my possessions while I'm still alive," I replied evenly. "Something you seem to have forgotten." Zachary stepped forward, adopting a more conciliatory tone. "Dad, we were just trying to help organize things during your recovery. You're misunderstanding the situation. I had anticipated their attempts to gaslight me, to rewrite the narrative of what had happened." I reached for the tablet on my bedside table and turned it toward them. Let me show you what I misunderstood, I said, tapping the screen to access saved security footage. Here's Thomas searching my office for financial documents the night I was admitted to the hospital. I swiped to another clip. Amanda cataloging my possessions for sale. Another swipe. Zachary bringing in an antique dealer to appraise furniture that's been in our family for generations. Their faces paled as they realized I had witnessed everything. More highlights, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Moving trucks at the Connecticut house. The sale of my car collection. The emptying of the beach house. And my personal favorite, your toast to my early inheritance plan while drinking my 30-year-old scotch. I set the tablet down, meeting their stunned gazes directly. You couldn't even wait for me to die before dividing my possessions. You celebrated your windfall while I lay in a hospital bed fighting for my life. Did you ever stop to consider that I might survive? That I might discover what you were doing? The room fell silent, the only sound the soft beeping of the heart monitor I was still connected to. Thomas was the first to recover, shifting quickly from shock to indignation. You've been holding us back financially for years, he accused. We just wanted what would eventually be ours anyway. Eventually, I repeated. A word that means at some future time, not while your father is in the hospital recovering from a heart attack. Amanda attempted a different approach. Daddy, we were scared. When you had the heart attack, we panicked. We made poor choices, but we were just trying to secure our future. By selling the beach house your mother loved? By emptying the home where you grew up? Those weren't panicked decisions, Amanda. Those were calculated actions that took place over weeks. Zachary, always the most emotionally manipulative, made a last attempt. What about our inheritance? You're leaving your own children with nothing? I leaned forward, looking each of them in the eye. You've already taken plenty. The artwork, the electronics, the cars, the collectibles, all sold without my permission. But the properties were never yours to sell, because 6 months ago, I legally transferred them into a trust. What kind of trust? Thomas demanded, the financial planner in him emerging. Who controls it? An irrevocable trust, I answered, one that cannot be undone or altered. And as for who controls it, I paused, knowing the final revelation would be the most shocking to them. The trustee is my wife. 3 pairs of eyes widened in perfect synchronization. Wife? Amanda sputtered. What wife? Sophia and I were married 3 months ago in a private ceremony, I explained. We kept it quiet because of how cruelly you treated her from the moment you met her. She is now legally my wife and the trustee of the family trust that owns my major assets. That gold digging, Thomas began, his face contorting with anger. Careful, I interrupted sharply. Sophia has her own money. Unlike you 3, she's never asked me for financial support. In fact, she's the one who helped me see how my enabling was harming you. You can't do this to us, Zachary insisted, desperation evident in his voice. We'll fight it in court. You're welcome to try, I said calmly. Jackson prepared everything meticulously. The trust is ironclad, the marriage is legal, and I have extensive documentation of your actions since my hospitalization. How do you think a judge would view children selling off their living father's possessions without permission? The fight seemed to drain out of them as the reality of their situation sank in. They had gambled everything on my death or incapacitation and lost spectacularly. So that's it? Amanda asked, her voice small. We get nothing? You get the opportunity to rebuild an actual relationship with your father, I said, feeling suddenly exhausted by the confrontation. One based on love rather than what you can get from me financially. Whether you take that opportunity is entirely up to you. I gestured toward the door. I need to rest now. My heart is still healing, in more ways than one. They left without another word, their shoulders slumped in defeat. As the door closed behind them, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The confrontation had been every bit as difficult as I'd anticipated, but also necessary. For the first time since my heart attack, I felt like I could finally begin to truly heal. Returning home after 6 weeks of hospitalization and rehabilitation was a bittersweet homecoming. My house stood like a shell of its former self, walls bare where artwork had hung, empty spaces where furniture had stood, cabinets and closets half empty. The security cameras had captured the systematic dismantling of my home, but seeing it in person was a different experience entirely. I stood in the foyer, leaning on my cane, and felt the emotional weight of all that had been lost. My gaze traveled to the empty spot where Elizabeth's favorite reading chair had been, to the wall where our wedding portrait had hung, to the now vacant corner that had housed my record player and collection. "It's just a house," Sophia said gently, standing beside me with her hand on my arm. "We can make it a home again." She had moved in to help with my recovery, bringing warmth and life back into spaces that had been coldly pillaged. Each day, she placed fresh flowers on the kitchen table, played classical music through portable speakers, and filled the rooms with the scent of home cooking. Those first weeks home were a time of grief, not just for the lost possessions, but for the family relationships I had believed in despite mounting evidence to the contrary. I mourned the children I thought I had raised, the values I thought I had instilled, the love I thought transcended material considerations. Sophia gave me space to process these feelings while ensuring I followed my cardiac rehabilitation program diligently. "Your heart is healing," she would remind me. "Both the physical one and the emotional one." After a month of silence from my children, I decided to reach out individually. Whatever they had done, they were still my flesh and blood, and Elizabeth would have wanted me to try one more time. I invited Thomas to lunch at a quiet restaurant near his office. He arrived looking uncomfortable, but agreed to sit down. "I'm not here to lecture you," I began after we'd ordered. "I want to understand." After some initial resistance, Thomas finally opened up about the gambling addiction he'd been hiding. What had started as weekend poker games in college had escalated to high-stakes tables, sports betting, and eventually dangerous loans from people who used threats rather than contracts. "I was in for $800,000, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. "They threatened to hurt Diane and the kids if I didn't pay." His voice cracked. "I was desperate, Dad. I convinced myself that once you were gone, the inheritance would solve everything. Then when you had the heart attack, it seemed like fate was giving me a way out." I listened without interrupting, feeling the complex tangle of disappointment in his choices and empathy for his desperation. "You need help, Thomas. Professional help for the gambling. And you need to come clean with Diane." He nodded, tears threatening. "I know. I just don't know how to start fixing something this broken." "One step at a time," I said. "That's how I'm rebuilding my heart. That's how you'll rebuild your life." Amanda agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the following week. Always image-conscious, she arrived perfectly styled, but I could see the strain around her eyes. "The interior design business is bankrupt," she confessed after preliminary small talk. "Has been for almost a year. I've been covering client purchases with my own credit cards, hoping for a big break that never came." Her 2 divorces had left her financially drained, and the lifestyle she projected on social media required increasing debt to maintain. "I look successful," she said bitterly. "The reality is, I'm nearly $500,000 in debt." "Why didn't you tell me how bad things were?" I asked. "Because I was ashamed," she whispered. "Everyone thinks I have the perfect life. The truth is, I'm one missed payment away from losing everything." Zachary was the most difficult to reach. He agreed to meet only after I texted that I would come to his apartment if he wouldn't come to me. We sat on a bench in a local park, feeding ducks in awkward silence before he finally spoke. "I never felt like I measured up," he admitted, tossing breadcrumbs with too much force. "Thomas was the successful businessman. Amanda was Mom's perfect daughter. I was just extra." "That's not true," I protested. "Your mother adored you. We both did. But you were always bailing me out," he countered. "Always fixing my mistakes." Deep down, I knew I was the disappointment. So, taking my things while I was in the hospital was, what? Revenge? Zachary stared at the water. It was proving I could succeed at something. Being the best at liquidating your stuff, faster than Thomas or Amanda. Pathetic, right? His self-awareness caught me off guard. Not pathetic, misguided. You've been trying to find yourself in all the wrong places. These individual conversations opened doors to potential healing. but I was clear with each child about my conditions for moving forward. They would each need therapy for their specific issues: gambling addiction for Thomas, financial counseling for Amanda, career guidance and self-esteem work for Zachary. We would have regular family meetings with clear boundaries, and most importantly, financial support would be earned through demonstrated responsibility, not given freely. The trust will provide for your futures, I explained, but only when you've shown you can handle it responsibly. Over the following months, some of my possessions mysteriously reappeared. Thomas returned several boxes of records he claimed to have stored for safekeeping. Amanda brought back some of Elizabeth's jewelry she said she'd borrowed during the confusion. Zachary returned photo albums he insisted he'd kept to digitize for preservation. We all knew these were face-saving excuses, but I accepted them as olive branches, small steps toward rebuilding trust. Other items were gone forever, sold to strangers who had no connection to the memories they represented. 6 months after my heart attack, I hosted a family dinner at my home. Sophia cooked Elizabeth's favorite lasagna recipe, and for the first time, my children treated her with cautious respect rather than open hostility. The changes in each of them were subtle but noticeable. Thomas attended Gamblers Anonymous 3 times weekly and had come clean to his wife about his addiction. Amanda had filed for bankruptcy and moved to a smaller apartment, beginning the difficult journey toward financial responsibility. Zachary had enrolled in community college courses in accounting, discovering an unexpected aptitude for numbers. As we sat around the dining table, a new one Sophia and I had selected together, I reflected on how close I had come to enabling their destructive behaviors permanently. Had I not discovered their betrayal, my death would have unleashed millions of dollars on 3 people unprepared to handle it responsibly. The inheritance would have funded Thomas's gambling, Amanda's unsustainable lifestyle, and Zachary's aimless drifting, eventually leaving them exactly where they were now, but without the opportunity to grow through difficulty. "I'd like to share something," I said as we finished dessert. "Sophia and I have made some decisions about the trust." All eyes turned to me attentively. "The majority of the assets will fund community projects, scholarships for first-generation college students, small business grants, and affordable housing development. The kind of opportunities I had when I was starting out with nothing." I saw disappointment flash across their faces before they carefully controlled their expressions. "However," I continued, "there are provisions for each of you based on demonstrated growth and responsibility. Educational expenses, legitimate business investments, retirement security, all available under specific conditions. So we have to earn it," Thomas said thoughtfully. "You have to show you can handle it," I corrected. "Money is like water. It can nourish growth or erode foundations. I want it to help you bloom, not wash away what you've built." After dinner, standing in the kitchen with Sophia as she loaded the dishwasher, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. "Do you think Elizabeth would approve of how I've handled things?" I asked. Sophia considered the question carefully. "I think she would be proud of your courage in facing difficult truths. And I think she would be hopeful about the new path forward you've created." I nodded, believing she was right. Elizabeth had always valued truth and growth over comfort and stagnation. The path ahead with our children would not be easy, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. Looking back on that summer of betrayal and revelation, I realize now that sometimes we need to lose material things to find what truly matters. My heart attack nearly took my life but saved my family from a legacy of entitlement and dependence. The possessions I lost cannot compare to the authentic relationships we're slowly rebuilding, relationships based on truth rather than transaction. If you're watching this and wrestling with similar challenges in your family, remember that true love sometimes requires difficult boundaries. Enabling destructive behavior isn't kindness. It's a slow poison that prevents growth. The hardest gift I ever gave my children was the opportunity to stand on their own feet and build lives of genuine achievement. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between what someone wanted and what they needed? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, Please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about family, growth, and finding strength in life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's in your bank account, but the values you live by and the lessons you learn through adversity.